How many of you locked your homes before you came here today? Everybody? How many of us locked our cars in the car park? Why? How many of us have regular medical checkups? Yeah? Why? How many of us take our cars in to be serviced? Why? You like paying lots of money for no good reason. All right. We are very conscious of threats, aren't we? Way more conscious of threats than we think we are. That's why we lock our houses. That's why we lock our cars. That's why we have medical checkups. That's why we have our cars serviced. Because we know that there are threats to our well-being, and we want to try and avoid those threats or mitigate against those threats as best as we possibly can. Right? That's why we do it. And it's a rational thing to do. Except what's interesting is that we're very good in perceiving and responding to threats in the material realm. But how well are we at responding to threats in the spiritual realm? Are we conscious that when we turn on the idiot box, there are threats to our soul and to our character? Are we conscious that when we go surfing on the net, there are threats to our character and our spiritual well-being? How cognizant are we of threats to our soul and to our spirituality? Maybe not so much, but maybe we should be. So there are threats to our spiritual well-being every day in our world and in our culture. And to help us realize that and to mitigate against it, can you turn your Bibles, please, to Genesis chapter 34. Genesis chapter 34 is a very heavy chapter, a very dark chapter, and a very somber chapter. It's all about compromise, corruption, and cowardice. They're not your favourite themes, unless you have a dark nature, dark sense of humour, perhaps. But in this chapter, we're going to see significant threats to the spiritual well-being of a community as well as individuals. And we can learn from the inverse how we should respond to these threats. We're continuing in our series on Jacob. And Jacob has been out of the country for 20 years, out of the promised land for 20 years. And he's just come back into the promised land in the previous chapter. And so now we're kind of set to see, well, how does our hero, he's wrestled with God, he's changed, he's become more spiritual, and he's back in the land. So now we're expecting some big things from Jacob, some big obedience. So let's see how he does when a threat comes his way. We're in chapter 34. Now, chapter 34 is going to be centered around the rape of Jacob's daughter, Dinah. Her name is Dinah, D-I-N-A-H. And here's an outline of the chapter. And what you'll see, if you look at chapter 34, verse 2, you'll see that the abuse takes place. When Shechem, son of Hamor, the Hivite, the ruler of that area, saw her, he took her and he raped her. And if you go to the end of the chapter, verse 31, Simeon and Levi reply to their dad, "Should we have treated our sister like a prostitute?" And the same incident is being referred to. And so the violation of Dinah actually bookends this chapter, meaning that this sexual abuse is the issue that the chapter is dealing with. And so that's the threat that comes to Jacob. And so the story's being set up. Jacob's this man of God. He's had this experience with God, wrestling with God. He's back in the promised land. How's he going to deal with this tragedy, with this horrible situation that's now appeared on the scene? So let's read chapter 34, verse 1. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, the daughter that Leah had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. Literally, it's went out to see the women of the land. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of that area, saw her, he took her and raped her. Twice before, at least in the book of Genesis, we've seen that progression. See and take. Genesis chapter 3, the woman saw the fruit, that it was good, and she took it and ate it. Genesis chapter 6, the sons of God saw that the daughters of women were good, so they took them. This is bestial behavior. Animals don't have a rational soul, right? What they have is appetite, and they have instinct. And so they work on appetite and instinct. They see and they eat. So when we behave like animals, we see something, it appeals to our appetite, so we seize it. So what Shechem here is doing is animalistic to the core. He's behaving like a beast. Verse 3, his heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. And Shechem said to his father Hamor, "Get me this girl as my wife." So then we're set up for verse 5. When Jacob heard that his daughter Dinah had been defiled, his sons were in the fields with his livestock. So he did nothing about it until they came home. Oops. Worse than oops. So here you have a horrible violation of Jacob's daughter, and he learns about it, and what we read in the text is he does absolutely nothing about it. That's not good. So his boys come home in verse 6, and then we move into the next section of the chapter, which is where the narrator puts his emphasis. This is where most of the action takes place. So the narrator wants us to focus in on these negotiations, because the perpetrator is Shechem. He has raped Dinah, and now he tells his father, "I want this girl now because I love her." And so Hamor and Shechem are going to go to Jacob and negotiate for a bride price. They're going to negotiate for Dinah. Verse 6, then Shechem's father Hamor went out to talk with Jacob. Meanwhile, Jacob's sons had come in from the fields as soon as they heard what had happened. They were shocked and furious. Ought not that have been Jacob's response? Wasn't. They were shocked and furious because Shechem had done an outrageous thing in Israel by sleeping with Jacob's daughter, a thing that should not have been done. So the narrator lets you know what he thinks about the incident. This is disgraceful. This is ghastly. He says it twice. He says it's an outrageous thing in Israel and it should never have been done, just to emphasize the point. Do not go away thinking that this is in any way acceptable behavior from Shechem. It's not. It's outrageous. Verse 8, but Hamor said to them, my son Shechem has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife. Intermarry with us, give us your daughters, and take our daughters for yourselves. You can settle among us. The land is open to you. Live in it, trade in it, and acquire property in it. Then Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, let me find favor in your eyes, and I will give you whatever you ask. Make the price for the bride and the gift I am to bring as great as you like, and I'll pay whatever you ask me. Only give me the young woman as my wife. Okay. Because their sister, Dinah, had been defiled, the author again is not letting you forget the crime, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor. Now hold on, that must be a misprint. It must say there, because his daughter had been defiled, Jacob replied. No, Jacob's not taking the leadership here, is he? It's the brothers who are taking the leadership here. And they are speaking deceitfully. So they said to them, we can't do such a thing. We can't give our sister to a man who is not circumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. We will enter into an agreement with you on one condition only, that you become like us by circumcising all your males. Then we will give you our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves. We'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we'll take our sister and go. Now, just jump down to verse 26. What do they mean by take our sister and go? What's happening here? Verse 26, plot spoiler. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword, and they took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. Dinah, was being held hostage. So she was raped and then kidnapped all this time. So while they're negotiating, Dinah is held up as a hostage back in Shechem's house. So this negotiation, by the way, on both parties, is deceitful and despicable. Everybody is wrong here. This is really bad. So Hamor and Shechem, the Hivites living in the land of Canaan, they've got no remorse whatsoever for the crime that's been committed. None of that comes through whatsoever. They're holding Dinah hostage, so they're not entering into negotiations in good faith, are they? What if the boys, Jacob and his boys, say no? Well, they've got the girl anyway. They misrepresent the deal that they're making either to their own people, as we'll get to in a minute, or to Jacob and the boys. And of course, they're greedy for gain. We'll get to that in a minute as well. Conversely, Jacob's boys are deceitful. We're told that outright. They have no intentions of going through with this deal, so they're deceitful from the start. They are going to desecrate the sign of circumcision, the covenant sign, and they also are greedy for gain. So you have two bad faith characters getting engaged in a negotiation here. Neither has the intent to follow through faithfully with what they're promising. So this is not a good scene here. But anyway, so just remember, in the back of your mind, Dinah's being held hostage here. And the boys say, well, we can't enter into a negotiation with you unless you become like us, and so you need to get circumcised. So what the boys are doing there is desecrating the covenant symbol of circumcision given to Abraham in Genesis chapter 17. To help you see this, let's just imagine a ridiculous scenario, okay? So I'm going to propose something ridiculous. Let's say we have some non-Christian neighbours who have a beef with us, and they've wronged us because they've graffitied the car park or whatever it is. But they want to make a deal with us. And so they come to us and say, hey, look, we graffitied your car park, but we want to make it okay. And we say, we can't make it right with you unless you come and partake of communion with us. Now, the communion means nothing to them because they're not Christians. But what we want to do, they're going to come and have communion. We're going to put a laxative in the communion wine, in the juice. So they come in and they drink the juice and off they go. We mess them up. We get revenge. Now, would the Lord be happy with us using communion like that? We're desecrating it, aren't we? We're desecrating a holy sign that God has given us that is sacred, that is special. The boys are doing the same with circumcision. This is a holy covenant sign between God and his people, and they're using it to get revenge on another group of people. It's despicable. It's godless. So, anyway, that's what they're doing. Verse 18. Their proposals seemed good to Hamor and his son Shechem, the young man who was the most honoured of all his father's family. They lost no time in doing what they said because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. So Hamor and his son Shechem went to the gate of their city to speak to the men of their city. Verse 21. So notice now what they're going to say to their townspeople. It's going to be a little bit different to what they said to Jacob and the boys. These men are friendly towards us. Ha ha ha. Little do they know. They said, let them live in our land and trade in it. The land has plenty of room for them. We can marry their daughters and they can marry ours. But the men will only agree to live with us as one people only on the condition that our males be circumcised as they themselves are. Now, they left out one part there. When they were talking to Jacob and the boys, they said, you can marry our daughters, we'll marry your daughters, and you can have our land. You can buy land. He doesn't mention that to the townspeople. It's just about the daughters. No land. And then he says this, verse 23, won't their livestock, their property, and all their other animals become ours? So they're thinking, if we join with them and they marry us, then we're just going to absorb them into our community, and all that is theirs will become ours. And this is very attractive because Jacob is a very wealthy man. Jacob and his boys, very wealthy. And so they've got dollar signs in their eyes. They're thinking, oh, this is a good deal, guys. This is a good deal. Short-term pain, guys. Long-term gain is what he's saying here. So verse 24, all the men who went out of the city gate agreed with Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male in the city was circumcised. So that's the negotiations. Then we get to the next crime, the next set of crimes. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, that is Dinah's full brothers. Dad didn't care about it, but the full brothers certainly did. They took their swords and they attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword, and they took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. The sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted the city where their sister had been defiled. They seized their flocks and herds and donkeys and everything else of theirs in the city and out in the fields. They carried off all their wealth and all of their women and children, taking as plunder everything in the houses. So you've got some poetic justice here with the Hebrew word for taken. Dinah was taken in verse 2, so therefore Simon and Levi take their swords, then they take Dinah from the hostage situation, and then the boys come along and they take all the booty from the town. And what is horribly ironic, ugly irony here, is that to avenge the taking of a woman by force, that's Dinah, the sons of Jacob do exactly that themselves, rounding up all the town's women after killing their husbands. So they commit the same crime that they're seeking to punish. Wow, what a horrible episode. Thankfully, our hero now is about to come onto the scene. Thankfully, now we've got Jacob. He's the man, right? He's going to make all this right. Let's have a look what Jacob does in verse 30. First time he speaks in the whole chapter. Jacob says to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." Interesting response from Jacob. Doesn't seem to be directing them in the right way here, does he? And why did he just single out Simeon and Levi? Because doesn't verse 27 say all the rest of the sons came in and looted the bodies and took off the women? But the 2 boys replied, and this is significant because Jacob does not have the last word in this story, because he is showing terrible leadership here and terrible manlyhood as well. The boys replied, should he have treated our sister like a prostitute? Should he have defiled our sister? And that's the question that we're left with at the end of the chapter. So this is a dark and foreboding chapter. In one sense, it's a story about what happens when God is left out of the picture. You will notice God's name is not mentioned in this chapter at all. His name is mentioned at the end of the previous chapter, in the last verse of the previous chapter. You've got the name El mentioned. First verse of the next chapter, the next story, God comes on the scene. So this story, God is not there. And he's not there because he doesn't care. He's not there because all the men in this story are refusing to submit to him or acknowledge him or seek him. So when you leave God out of the picture, this is the kind of thing that happens in life. These are the kind of decisions you make when you leave God out of the picture. It's an absolute mess. And so they're all villains. So you've got Shechem's disgraceful act against Dinah. You've got Hamor's deceitful negotiations. You've got Jacob's sons' heinous crimes. And they're all evidence of toxic masculinity, which is a bit of a buzzword these days, but that's true toxic masculinity. It's just using brute force to get what you want, and deceit. And then you've got Jacob's incredibly poor, apathetic leadership, which is passive masculinity, which is where many men are going today in our culture, because our culture is not leaving any room for men to be men. So all said and done, it's a lose-lose situation, this chapter. But we do have lessons to learn. So 3 threats to our witness. So if we think of our as believers, as we are a covenant community with God. We're under the new covenant. So we're a community of believers, and we're meant to be a light on the hill. We're meant to be different to the world so that we can reach the world for Christ. But in our culture, there are threats to this witness that will undermine that. And we've got to be aware of what they are. The first one is worldliness. Worldliness threatens our witness. We need to resist it. So where do we see worldliness in this chapter? Well, we see it in the negotiations that take place between Hamor and Jacob. I mean, I'm hesitant to say this also, but I think you also see it a little bit perhaps with Dinah's behaviour. It says in verse 1 that she goes out to see the ladies of the land, but in verse 2 she's the one who is seen. So the question comes, why was she doing that? Why was she going to the pagans to look at the ladies? But the main threat of worldliness here was the negotiations that Hamor, the pagan, the Hivite, the Canaanite, was entering into with Jacob. And Jacob seemed to be entertaining it because he doesn't say anything. The boys weren't, but Jacob seems to be entertaining those negotiations. Now, take a step back and remember, when you're reading Scripture, you've got to think, what was the message to the original audience? So this book was written to the Israelites coming out of Egypt. They would have received the books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy pretty much at the same time, or at least within a few years of each other. So they would have all those books coming at them at the same time. In the law, which is in Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Exodus, they were told not to associate with the Canaanites. Don't intermarry with the Canaanites. In fact, you've got to destroy the Canaanites. And then they're told to do that in the law, and here you've got the rationale for it in this chapter. This is like a chapter saying, see what happens when you mingle with the pagans? Their morality becomes your morality. See what happens when you marry the pagans? Again, their morality will become your morality. So there's a sense in which this story is warning those Israelites about worldliness, about engaging with the world in a way that compromises their values and their faith. And that's a threat for us as well. We are threatened by embracing the ethos or the values or the thinking of the world, and that's going to compromise our values and our faith and our livelihoods. So from an applicational perspective, how do we resist worldliness? I think the key passage is 2 Corinthians chapter 6, 14 to 18. But be careful where you go in life, just practically. So this is like with Dinah. Just be careful where you go. I don't know if you heard the news, but there's this high draft pick in the AFL who's lost the plot, hasn't played football for a while. He's trying to get his life back on track, apparently. But the other week, he was caught up in an incident outside a nightclub in Melbourne at 2 a.m. in the morning where a shot was fired. He didn't fire the shot. He had nothing to do with it, but he was there. And the question comes, why was he there? What good can come from being at a nightclub at 2 a.m. in the morning? The very fact he's there shows a lack of wisdom. And so that's why be careful where you go. Where we go can influence what we do and who we become. So be careful where we go. Be careful who you marry. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, 14 to 18 is a passage about the warning against being unequally yoked. And so this is the idea of what does light have to do with darkness? And so I think the scriptures are clear that as Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, right at the end, he says, if your husband dies, you're free to marry anyone, only let them be in the Lord. You've got freedom to marry, but as long as they share your faith. Why is that so important? Because if you hitch your wagon to someone who doesn't share your faith, then your direction in life is completely different. You want to do everything. You want to spend your money, use your time, use your talents in order to praise God and to worship God and to serve God. They don't. They want to go in a different direction. They want to use it to further their own causes, feather their own nests, provide for their own family, whatever it might be, but you're going to be finding yourselves being pulled in different directions. And when you have children, well, what are you going to do with the kids? Well, you're going to say, well, they need to come to church. No, they don't need to go to church. And that's going to cause conflict and unrest, and then the children are going to be all confused. It's not a good thing. And the same is true for business partnerships. So be careful who you partner with in business. If you go into a business partnership with a non-Christian who doesn't share your values, who doesn't care about the gospel, then you're on a different page, or you haven't thought through the page that you should be on. Because if you're in business, or even if you're working, whatever you're doing, but if you're in business for the glory of God, right? 1 Corinthians 10:31, whatever you do, do it for the glory of God. So you're in business for the glory of God. You're making money for the glory of God. You're making money to be able to use that money to further the cause of the gospel and to bring glory to the Lord. Firstly and foremostly. Secondly, you're making money to provide for your family. Thirdly, you're making money to provide for the poor. That's it. But number one, you're doing it for the glory of God. Your non-Christian business partner is not doing it for the glory of God. Different purpose completely with respect to why they are seeking to make lots of money and run this business. And that's going to lead to different core values and all the rest of it. And so again, you're going to be on different pages, which is why the Bible's wisdom is to avoid worldliness, be careful where you go, be careful who you marry, be careful who you get into business with. Don't let the world's values corrupt your faith, because they will. They will. And by the way, the same is true with Netflix and the internet. Increasingly, you'll see coming through Hollywood and media a very godless morality, a new age morality. They're pushing the LGBTQ stuff like nobody's business to try and make it normative. And when you watch this stuff, then that kind of washes over you, and all of a sudden you think, oh yeah, that's right, that's normal, that's okay. And it's not. But it's the world seeking to conform you into its mold. But Romans 12, 1 and 2, don't be conformed to this world. Don't let the world push you into its mold, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. So that's the first threat. Second, wickedness. Wickedness threatens our witness. We have to reject wickedness. And by reject wickedness, I don't just mean don't do it. We have to stand against it. So we actually have to be vocal against it. Jacob should have been vocal against the wickedness that had taken place. At the very least, he should have been vocal against the wickedness. He wasn't. He was silent as a man of God. When great wickedness was perpetrated against his own family and against the covenant people of God, he was silent. But we've got to reject wickedness. But here's the wickedness of Jacob's sons. And I haven't even got Jacob's wickedness here, but this is Jacob's son. So desecration, they desecrate the sign of the covenant, circumcision, showing that they're holding that which is sacred very poorly, very lowly. Deceit, murder. They kill these men who are defenseless. Theft, they steal all of their property. They kidnap all these women and probably intermarry with them. So you've got this whole litany of crimes that the covenant people commit. and such ought not to be so. This is the people God has said. Remember the whole plan of God? Genesis 10:11, Tower of Babel, all these peoples are split around the world into different ethnic groups, different language groups. Therefore, what do? We raise up one people, one country, if you like, to reach all these other peoples, all these other countries. So that's God's plan of redemption. This people that God raises up, Israel, have to be holy and different and pure so that they become a billboard for God's grace and God's love. And the other nations and the other peoples look at the people of God and they say, wow, you guys are different. Your God is so great. We want to be a part of your God. That's the evangelistic strategy of God in the Old Testament. And actually in the New Testament too, but the people of God now is the church. So when God's people behave like this, the people around them say, wow, you're actually no different to what we are. So your God is no different to our gods. So there's no need for us to embrace Yahweh. Completely undermines our witness. Devastating to the cause. And this is why we need to abstain from wickedness, but also stand against it, be vocal against it. And no point being vocal against wickedness and then perpetrating wickedness. That's even worse. And we've been guilty of doing that as a church down through the ages. But we need to both stand against wickedness and cease wickedness. So from an applicational perspective, simply reject anything morally corrupt. Just reject it, and also reject anything morally dubious. So this is the phrase, when in doubt, throw out. If you're going through your wardrobe, okay? This afternoon you might have some time, say, I've got to refresh my wardrobe. Should I keep this or not? I don't know. When in doubt, throw it out. Same is true with morality. So you're watching something or you're embracing something or there's a temptation that comes your way. Oh, is this morally okay or not? Well, it could be all right. I'm doing some cultural studies here maybe. And if it's doubtful, throw it out. If you have to think about it a little bit, throw it out. Just play it safe. Maybe it's okay. Maybe your conscience is really tight. That's okay. Live within your conscience. It's when your conscience is too loose, we've got issues. So when in doubt, throw out. Reject that which is morally dubious. And Ephesians 5:11 is a key verse here, where we're told to have nothing to do with the unfruitful works of darkness. Have nothing to do with them. But rather we are to stand against them. We are to expose them, it says. So that's where we don't just cease to do evil, we speak against evil. Third temptation. Want of leadership threatens our witness. Remedy it. So worldliness threatens our witness. Wickedness threatens our witness. Want of leadership threatens our witness. Remedy it. I think this is the main point of the passage. I think this is the main point of chapter 34. Let's just dive a little bit deeper into Jacob here. Jacob's negligence as a dad is highlighted in this passage, okay? First up, Dinah is the daughter of Leah, the wife that Jacob disliked. So Dinah was in the second row. If you're a rugby union player, she's a second rower. The ones who were at the front were the children of the maidservants. The maidservants and their kids were at the front. They were the first ones who were going to be killed by Esau, should Esau get angry. In the second row were Leah and all her kids, including Dinah and Levi and Simeon. In the third row were his favourites. Right? So these were the kids who weren't loved, and Jacob made it known that they weren't really loved. So his partiality that we've seen previously, this is where it comes back to bite him. His partiality comes back to bite him. Dinah is Jacob's daughter. She's referred to as Jacob's daughter in verses 1, 3, 5, 7, but never again after that. It switches. Dinah is Simeon and Levi's sister. in verses 13, 14, 17, 31. So she moves from being Jacob's daughter to being the boy's sister, because they're the ones who take guardianship of her. They're the ones who are outraged. They're the ones who are going to do something about this travesty of justice. They're going to try and remedy the situation, not Jacob. So Jacob is portrayed as kind of like not being the father at the end of the passage. And then you need to contrast Jacob's passivity here with Hamor's aggressive negotiating on behalf of his son. Isn't it interesting? Hey, Dad, I've just raped this woman, but I want her as my wife. Can you go get her for me? Sure, son. I'm going to try my darndest to get that girl for you. And so Hamor goes into bat for his son and haggles hard and negotiates hard. Does Jacob do that for his daughter? Now, both fathers indulge their sons, by the way. Really bad parenting. So Hamor, rather than saying, son, what you've done is despicable and disgraceful, and according to the law, you probably should die. Doesn't do that at all. He indulges his son. Oh, okay, son, you've got to, yeah, sure. Let's not worry about what you've done. Let's just try and meet your wishes. And then Jacob does the same with his sons who pillage the town and take the women. He indulges them. Does not reprimand them at all. Whatever. This is referred to as child-centered parenting or helicopter parenting. It's all about the children. Whatever they want, just give them whatever they want. And this is how it turns out. Also, by the way, contrast Jacob's lack of outrage with his grief over Joseph in chapter 37. So in the next story about Joseph, the boys throw Joseph down the well, but they tell their dad that they've killed him or he's died, got ripped to pieces by a wild beast. And when Jacob hears that, he goes into an uncontrollable grief for days and days and days. Doesn't do that here, does he? His daughter has been defiled, violated. A crime, a heinous crime has been perpetrated against his daughter, and there's not a word. No outrage, no grief, nothing. So he's a negligent dad. This is one of 3 or 4 rapes in the Old Testament, and each one has the same message. It's 3 or 4, depending on what you do with David and Bathsheba incident. I actually think it was probably a rape. That's why I've got it included in the table. But certainly you've got 3, and in each case, the guardian is negligent. And each of these episodes is a reference to this is what happens when those men entrusted with leadership don't lead. Bad things happen. When men of God don't lead their households and those ministries or those or take on the responsibilities that they've been given, bad things happen to those under their care. And they are accountable for that. And so when you come across those stories later on in the scriptures, they're kind of referring back to this incident, because this is the first one. Here's a full table of Jacob's negligence as a leader. So not just as a father, he's not just a negligent father, he's a negligent leader. His first words come at the end of the episode. Doesn't speak until right at the end. He exhibits no grief at the crime committed against his daughter, nor any joy at her rescue. She was a hostage. For goodness sake, she was a hostage and she's rescued. We have no record that Jacob shows any joy. He demands no justice or recompense when Hamor comes to him. At the very least, he should have been outraged and he should have demanded justice and recompense. At the least, he should have done that. But he didn't. He gives no spiritual guidance anywhere in this chapter. His concern when he does speak is self-focused. He's concerned about his standing amongst the pagans. What will they think about me now? And you'll notice I highlighted as I read, he uses the personal pronoun 8 times in the 16 Hebrew words that he says. In the NIV, it comes through 6 times. I, me. He makes this situation about him, as though he's the victim. Good night. That's atrocious. It just gets worse and worse and worse here for Jacob. And then he singles out Simeon and Levi for criticism and not the others. In fact, when he gives the blessing in chapter 49, he's going to bring this incident up against Simeon and Levi and say to them, you're going to be scattered throughout the tribes of Israel. You're not going to have your own tribe because of what you've done. But then he doesn't do anything about the other boys. So Jacob's actually the villain. I mean, they're all villains in this chapter, but Jacob perhaps the greatest. And not because of what he does per se, but what he doesn't do. So, how can we remedy the want of godly leadership? Men, I'm going to talk to men here. Men, please don't indulge your children. Don't just make them the center of your world where you do whatever they want you to do. Do what is right. Do what is best for them. Often, kids don't know what's best for them. They think they do, but often they don't. And that's your role as a parent, and particularly as a father, is to do what is right and to help them by not indulging them. A great mistake parents will make is that they want to be their little children's best friends. Right? The kid's 5 years old and mum and dad want to be their best friends. They don't want you to be their best friends. They want you to be their parents, to give them discipline and instruction and to teach them right and wrong and to inform their conscience and to help them to live. And if you do the job well enough, then when they get to 18, 19, 20, they will be your best friends. Men, fight for the honour and virtue of those in your household. You're the leader of your home. You're the pastor and the shepherd of your home. And you need to protect as best you can, guard as best you can those in your household, particularly the women. The women in your household are precious. Precious in the sight of God. And they look to you for leadership and they look to you for protection. They look to you for love. They look to you for stability. Give that to them as best you can. Fight for their honour and their virtue. Men, give spiritual leadership to your household. You're the shepherd. You're the pastor. I mean, I'm the pastor of this flock, but men, you're the pastor of your household. The responsibility before God is on you to shepherd your children and even your wife throughout the week. And then you're not told to do that with a heavy hand at all. It's meant to be grace-filled leadership, loving leadership. But give that leadership. You're the one responsible for having the Bible read in your home and for prayers being said in your home. Wives, you can help your husband do that. Don't nag him too much about that. But you can help him. Please help him. But men, it's on you. It's on me. We're the ones. Make sure the Bible's read at home. Make sure the prayers are said at home. Make sure that the family understands the importance of church and serving and worshipping God. Which leads to the fourth one. Men, show your household by your actions and your habits how important God is to you. That's where the kids are going to look to mum and dad particularly, to see what's really important. You say this, Dad, but you're doing this. So really, I figure probably what you're doing is more significant to you than what you're saying. So if you say that God's important, but you don't really show it in your life, then that means God's not really that important because this stuff is important. And your kids will go that way. 9 out of 10 will go that way. So you've got to match those things up. Show through your actions and your habits that you show your household what you value. Show how significant God and the gospel is to you. All right, let's close up. 3 threats to our witness: worldliness, wickedness, want of leadership. So with worldliness, we want to resist it. Wickedness, we reject it. Want of leadership, we remedy it. We remedy it. We build up good, godly leadership in our households. And then we'll have good, godly leadership in the church. And then we can make a real difference in our community. Big idea, we sum this all up. Godly leadership defends against worldly wickedness. Godly leadership defends against worldly wickedness. And that's what we're after, that's what we're seeking. To be a people of God, that God, in the midst of a wicked world where evil things happen because we live in a fallen world, but if we have godly leadership, then we have hope. Well, thank you for being with us this morning. Heavy message, heavy passage, but important one, I think.